Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar, answering those hard questions about coaching and Scrum. My name is Dave West, and I will be your host, mentor, and maybe add a little bit of content during today's webinar. So thank you for joining us. Few housekeeping things that we have to do first. And I do this really badly, so I do apologize because I just want to get into the content because we've got some great content and we have a great co-speaker today that I want to get to as quickly as possible. So your microphones are muted throughout, so don't worry, all that background noise is not going to affect us. Those dogs barking, kids crying, etc. But you can still ask questions. You have to do it electronically. So you can type questions into the webinar question box, as you can see just there, or you can type comments into the webinar comments box. There's two vehicles that you can pick. Obviously, ideally, questions would be a better place to put them. However, you can also make comments as you go along. I'm not going to be concentrating on them. The presenters are not, but we have somebody at Scrum.org HQ here in sunny Burlington, Massachusetts, who'll be paying attention to those and hopefully about to answer them. I will try to make some time for at the end to pick some of those questions and talk about them. If we don't get to them, maybe that will be the fodder for a great follow-on webinar, blog post, etc. We'll see how good those questions are. So feel free to use them. Please, as we go through today's webinar. Now, who's speaking? Well, you've heard me. Just to give you a formal title, my name's Dave West. I'm the CEO here at Scrum.org in just outside Boston in Burlington, Massachusetts. And I'm very fortunate to get my co-presenter, Maaike Klasen from the Netherlands. She's a Scrum Master and coach affiliated with ICF. Do you want to say hello to the audience, Maaike?
Yes, hi Dave. Hi. Thanks for having me. I'm a Scrum Master, and I have a background of educational psychology and play therapy, and I really see the value of using coaching skills within the Scrum framework. But I also really noticed that coaching is a profession, and it takes like a lifetime to really master it. But yeah, I'm very excited to contribute to the dialogue on how coaching skills fit into the Scrum framework. So very excited.
And that is the reason why we're talking today. When we started, I can't remember why, there was an email, I think. You sent me an email, I think, it seems like years ago. And
yeah, it was somewhere in August. Yeah.
It was in August, right? Yeah. And you said,
Yes,
hey, are you doing anything on professional coaching in the concept of Scrum? And I went, funny you should say that. Yes, no, maybe. And we started this conversation. And the first time we got on a Skype call or whatever, WhatsApp or whatever we were on, I was struck by how interesting this conversation is and how important it is. As you know, probably a product owner more than a Scrum Master, I've always been struck by the importance of helping people work together in a more effective way, psychological safety, trust, creating this environment. And I never really knew how to do it. It was always a little bit slapdash the way I did it. So I think that Maaike can help us and ICF can help us start to have a more intelligent conversation about this, I hope.
Yeah. And it's really about aligning that role of Scrum Master, the role of the coaching into the Scrum, and who knows, maybe in future to get the accreditation for that.
Funny you should say that. Obviously, you can see the slide here that, for the people that don't know Scrum.org, where have you been? No, seriously. Training certification is our business. We have a very active community of 300 over trainers, and we have a little bit over 13 million people come to our website every year around, certification, etc. And we're founded by the creator of Scrum, actually bizarrely, and this is always something like that I like to share. In this very building, one of the first ever Scrum projects, I think it was the first or second ever Scrum project, actually happened. So this is sort of hollow ground, or holy ground when it comes to Scrum here in Burlington, Massachusetts. Tell us a little bit, Maaike, about who ICF is. I wasn't very familiar with them until about a year ago, and then your email really set me on this journey with you around this.
Yeah, yeah. So this year they're actually celebrating their 25th years of existence, and they are actually worldwide known as the largest organization for professional coaches. And they develop a very high standard of coaching, which is known as the gold standard of coaching. And they do that through, a couple of points that you see here in the slide. So it's about independent certification. So it's from the associate certified coach level to a professional certified coach level to a master certified coach. It's about their accreditation programs for their coaching trainings. It's a worldwide network with trained professionals. So you know that everywhere around the world where you find an ICF coach, they all commit to the same high standard of coaching. And they're also at the moment working to comply its credentialing program with certification to global standards, including ISO.
Mm.
And they're also known for their research. You will find it on the website, on their website, a lot of research about the impact of coaching and also the impact of coaching cultures on organizations. But the most important thing is that as a client, you really know that if you find an ICF coach, that the coach has received quality training and extensive coaching experience. You have to show how many hours of coaching you have done, and that the coaching is assessed. So the ICF wants to hear you coaching.
Yeah.
So I think that's the ICF.
The reason why I was so interested in when we started and then you appeared and we carried on this conversation was because, one, I love the chapter model. I love the fact that you have a community, more of a community of coaches working together, and we'll obviously talk about that in a second. And the other thing that was very, very appealing was it's very consistent with what we do at Scrum.org. There's sort of like, this accredited program, this third party. I mean, you've met a number of our professional Scrum trainers. You know that we care about that very deeply as well. And then the third thing is the research. I mean, I'm hoping that we can start using that with the research we're doing. We can start bringing these things together so we actually can maybe get some shared terminology, maybe get some shared models around this. And so maybe, ladies and gentlemen, this is just a start of something pretty special. Talking of
Yeah.
community, this is the group of people that you were involved in trying to build some of these ideas and some of the content that we're talking about today.
Yeah, this it's a group of people that are very excited about the topic of coaching within Scrum. They're all coaches, Scrum Masters, Agile coaches. And in November, the 1st of November, actually, we came together and brainstormed about all the questions that we're going to discuss in this webinar. So it was a great feeder for this webinar. And there is Annemarie van der Meer from ICF Netherlands, and she has done a great deal in reviewing the content also of this webinar. So thank you very much, everyone, and up for more.
Yeah, what's interesting is this group is a combination of professional Scrum trainers, Chi Hong and Joshua, working with you guys, working with ICF people, and then some Agile coaches that are. I love the fact that it's no boundaries between them. I think that's the thing that's so super exciting about this.
Find each other in the dialogue. Yeah,
exactly.
definitely.
And I forgot that Magdalena is also part of this as well, so another PST. So,
Yeah.
all right, let's get on to the content. And everybody's like, come on, you're doing the pre-ramble, but context is important. You learn that apparently when you're coaching as well, understanding the
Definitely.
context.
Yeah.
So there's a few questions that I know I had. And so these are the questions that we put. Now, there's too many. So firstly, we're not necessarily going to get through all these questions. I apologize. That might be an opportunity for future webinars maybe, or blogs, etc. However, we wanted to have this, to at least see if these were the right questions. And you can see there's a sort of natural story arc to these questions. The first one is about, what is a professional coach? And I think that Maaike is going to share a lot around that. I mean, I've learned a few things from just working with her on it. So I'm like, oh, really? That's interesting. And then we're going to talk about, is there a difference? And obviously we'll pull on the work of Lyssa, Adkins, and some others who have really championed this around that. Then we'll move on to the Scrum and the framework. We'll then talk a little bit about, is it a full-time, part-time? This is actually true of Scrum Master and Professional Coach, and you'll see some battle scars there from personal experience from both of us. And then where does it fit? And then if we get to it, can we justify the cost? And obviously, if we don't get to it, I apologize. The short answer is yes, it's easy. You can easily justify it. But sometimes people don't want to listen to those justifications. Okay, so let's begin at the beginning. What is this professional coaching malarkey all about then? Tell me, Maaike, what is it? I mean, this is the ICF definition. I think that's a good place to begin, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So the ICF defines coaching as partnering with clients in a thought-provoking and creative process that inspires them to maximize their personal and professional potential. It is a powerful definition, though it is also a mouthful. So I can also imagine that it doesn't really speak to your mind straight away. So let me emphasize like the two parts that come out of this definition. And the first part is the partnering, which is all about that you partner with your client. So you're not the expert. You really believe that your client knows better and knows what's best for him or her. So the relationship is horizontal. And the second part is the goal-oriented focus. So it's all about a desired future. Yeah, so it's a goal-oriented process.
And so that's really, really interesting. There's two things. Well, one, when we say client, what we mean by client, or what you mean by client, is really the person that's being coached, the person that you have that that contract, in inverted commas, not necessarily a financial contract, but a
More of an
contract with.
agreement. Yeah.
An agreement.
Yeah.
Agreement's a much better word. Yes,
Yeah.
that's better. So
Yeah.
that's what you mean. Now that might be, if you're an external coach, you may be being paid by somebody else, right? Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, sometimes your client can be the sponsor himself. And just hire you, and there can also be a triangular relationship where there is a sponsor and where there's a client and where there's a coach.
Interesting. And that's something I think we'll explore later when we talk about privacy and that. And the other thing that you said, which I think is super interesting, and I never really thought about this. So I have to admit something, as we're all friends here, right? I have had counseling or whatever, I did the thing in my 30s and visited this guy and laid on a couch. And one thing that struck me, psychotherapy, I guess it's called. One thing that struck
my light
me.
goes, sorry. Yeah.
Oh, no worries. One thing that struck me was that we never really had any goals. Now, so I always felt that we were just sort of listening to me talk and talking about issues with my father and all the usual stuff, and we never really had any goals. So I think what's super interesting about this is, and it's something that I think's incredibly valuable, is that concept of goals.
No, definitely, and I think you're hitting the nail. Is that English?
Yes, that's a great expression.
Yeah, so yes, indeed. So it is about also separating psychotherapy or counseling from coaching, and coaching is really that goal-oriented process, and it's not about digging into someone's past or digging into problems. It's more, future-oriented.
Yeah. So it might be, and give an example of a goal would be sort of like dealing with maybe, I want to be heard a little bit more, maybe that's something in the team, or I seem to always have an issue with, that guy with the beard over there, or whatever it is. And,
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. This
Good.
is what I come across like on a daily basis. Yes.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So this is again another reason why I love ICF is you don't just sort of like waffle on about stuff. Not that coaching is a bit of waffle. You actually have these very concrete competency model things, and we have the same at Scrum.org. So anything that sort of jumps out there that you want to share with the audience and that would be interesting, Maaike?
Well, the idea is that if you want to guide your clients in finding their own solutions, in finding their own answers, you really need to have the toolkit to do that. You need to have professional coaching skills to be able to do that. So the ICF defined the model, developed the model of coaching competencies, and it goes from setting a foundation, co-creating the relationship, communicating effectively, and facilitating learning and results. And we don't have to go through them point by point, because then I would almost recommend a coaching training, and then you learn really about these skills. But it is about that. So you need to have the professional toolkit to help someone finding their own answers. Because if the client only, it's not only about asking, okay, so what do you want? If the client knew that, then he wouldn't need you really. So it's about the exploration process, and then setting goals and commit to them, and get the result the client wants.
I thought this was powerful because there's some, well, one, I think, setting the scene, that ethical base, which we're going to talk a little bit about more in a moment, and getting that coaching agreement. When I was first introduced to the idea of a coaching agreement, I was like, what? What's all that about then? Is that one of these working agreement things, that Scrum people love to talk about? Nothing's wrong with it. Love it. See a lot of value in it. However, how many agreements do you want? And then we talked a little bit about this, and then that creates, it's sort of, that is the basis, the foundation to create the relationship. And then there's this, really those last two sections, communication effectively and facilitating learning results, are this iterative process that a coach embarks upon with a client, I think is the word you use, that client thing. I thought that was really, really, really interesting. And when you sort of write it down, it's obvious, but actually, how many times do we do it? And I guess I like it because it's transparent, which is a very Scrum thing, right?
Yeah, there are some similarities there in how the coaching competencies are built up, and how you facilitate the coaching process also as a professional coach, and how you facilitate the Scrum framework and all the elements and the events in there.
And
Yeah.
it's action oriented, designing actions, delivering on it, progress, making people accountable. I know that Ken and Jeff love that about this. The one thing that Ken rails against, and he's had his moments with the sort of coaching models. Obviously, he's an inspirational thought leader. One thing that really upsets him is when it's just sort of like loosey goosey. That's an English expression. Sorry, Manga, but where it's like, what is it? Just spend time together. Let's use this thing. Let's do this. Let's play this game. Let's build some Lego. He hates that.
Yeah.
He loves goals, accountability, and I think that's very clear in the framework.
No, definitely. Coaching sometimes gets associated with a bit of a fluffiness and not concrete. Though in a coaching conversation, this is about making it concrete and understand meaning, and okay, how does it translate into actionable goals?
And the only way you can do that, right, is this sort of like the responsibility, this sort of like ethical foundation. In Scrum.org, we call it professionalism, but ethical, professional, whatever word you want to use. And you look a little bit about, you as a coach, that sort of like that ethical code, that professionalism.
Yes, yeah. So when you become an ICF member and an ICF coach, you do commit to the ethical code, and it's a responsibility you take. And well, it globally comes down to those 3 points on this slide. So it's firstly about the commitment to be a partner and to empower your client. So how we spoke about what we discussed when we spoke about the definition. And the second point is dealing with information that you get from that you could get from third parties, or how you provide information. And yeah, as a coach, you want to establish confidentiality. So that's a base. It's a foundation for coaching. It's a base for your coaching relationship, and also for the success of the coaching. So if we're talking about receiving information from third parties, as a coach, you actually want to avoid that. You want to avoid that you have information that you cannot share with your client, because that puts the trust relationship in danger. So yeah, that can be a tricky one, because sometimes you're in a corporate context, so people want to provide information, they want to share information with you, especially if you would put it in the light of the Scrum Master. So how do you deal with that? So there's some ethical, yeah, you need to position yourself in an ethical, acceptable way. And it's also about providing information. So in the ICF professional coaching ethical code, you don't provide information about what you discuss in the coaching. So you don't provide any information what the client is telling you. Also that, yeah, that is also challenging sometimes, because a manager can ask you to report about the performance of someone. And then the last part is the receiving information from the client, and it's also about providing it. So that is has to do with that there is a legal part around the confidentiality. So sometimes you touch upon topics that are putting someone in danger, maybe the client or someone around the client in the context, and then you bump into the law. So when the law adheres you to break the confidentiality, you could do that. So yeah, there is a little bit of a boundary there. And then the last point, so this was the dealing with information part in the ethical code, and the last point, it is about referring. So you need to be able to separate if the coaching is the right approach for the coaching question. If some situations ask for more advice, more problem-oriented approach, like psychotherapy or something. Sometimes it's medical, sometimes someone needs to be referred to a doctor, or so you need to be able to differentiate those situations, and to be able to refer.
I think that's really important, the boundary between, and this is a really challenging position. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm like, I will not want to be involved in this. This is really hard. But
Yeah,
I
it is.
really appreciate the
Yeah,
people that are, don't get me wrong. But talking a little bit about
yeah,
our last point, the
yeah,
knowing what your job is and where that boundary is, and when somebody brings to your attention something that, now it could be something as mundane as, hey, I don't know how Scrum works. There we go, that's a simple thing. Then actually, and then as a Scrum Master, that would be tricky because your job is to teach them. So let's find something else. I don't know how to do this particular type of technology. So you're not the expert. You need to say, hey, and help them find the right expert and go
yeah,
and fulfill that. It could be some medical thing, and that, et cetera, et cetera.
yeah,
Whatever those things are, it's important to define your boundary. You're not the parent, right? And I think there's a sort of like often a sort of parental kind of element to coaching, which I think is, though very fulfilling in some ways, is also counterproductive in the long run, because it ultimately makes them dependent on you in an unhealthy way. Do you agree, Maaike?
Yeah, now you're bringing in the parental part, which is more of the I don't get to it, but it's the parent and the child, and it has a name, it doesn't come to my mind now. But yeah, this is the partnering part of the role of the
Yeah.
coach, that you really partner, and the relationship is horizontal. So it's about you pulling a rope on both sides, and who's pulling first, like you're trying to keep it balanced. And it's like, yeah, a give and take relationship, horizontal, and you stand next to your client, or maybe even sometimes behind your client, and it's the servant leadership, I guess, as well, to really follow where the client is at and what the client is giving. So you're trying to, yeah,
It's tricky.
it's tricky. And in terms of the Scrum Master, when there's, for example, a technical question, it's very easy for me to refer, because then we go to a technical expert. And yeah, and you have the different hats as a Scrum Master as well.
Which we'll talk about in a second. Then the last point,
Yeah,
I just want to, before, and I know time's out, and we're not even got through the first question yet, but
I know.
confidentiality. I just wanted to bring up something that you highlighted there that's super, super important as a Scrum Master. So traditional management, which often Scrum Masters come from that place, right? We can't, I mean, that's just the reality. Team leaders become Scrum Masters. You adopt Scrum. That's often how it happens. Now, what's interesting is, who's your responsibility to? As a Scrum Master, your responsibility is, three. You got the organization, the product owner, and the team, right? And the team members within that team. What's interesting is that what you've highlighted, I think, super important. It's very easy to be that old manager where you're ultimately not just telling people what to do, maybe you stop that, but having a position of power. So when you go in and talk to the people, you know that you're like, oh, what's your status? How are you done? And the people treat you in that reverence kind of way. It's a sort of industrial paradigm. And particularly as ultimately the organization pay your wages, right? You are as a Scrum Master. Now, what you've highlighted in ICF professional coaching, this responsibility, is the fact that you're ultimately confident, that you treat it in the confidentiality area. I mean, it's about the confidentiality of information, which has that knock-on effect that it changes your relationship with the client. It isn't a power, you're the manager, they're the subordinate. It changes that, which is super valuable for transparency, just to pick one thing.
Yeah. So are you pointing out a little bit of a dilemma here?
But it's also challenging, right? The
Yeah,
fact
it
that
is
the person,
challenging.
you ultimately work for an organization, you may have information that is actually crucial for you to deliver this product early, to deliver it, ethically, to deliver this. I mean, imagine we're at Volkswagen and you're arguing
Yeah,
about emissions. You as a
yeah.
coach, you know that this developer in this team, this programmer in this team knows something really, and it's tearing them apart. But what
Mm.
you also know that we have to deliver, right? So you're like this, so what do you do?
Yeah, no, I would really like to explore this also with lots of people. Like, how do people act on this? How do Scrum Masters do this? And especially if you know more about how ICF coaching, the standard of ICF coaching, how do you do that? But look, it is all about making it very explicit which role you are taking, and also in every new situation with any manager, any individual, there my light goes again, any team, any organization, emphasizing the agreement on the coaching. And so you can just ask, like, okay, are you fine if I help you explore together with you the answers to all your questions, instead of advising and consulting you? Yeah, when it comes to the Scrum framework, you often do consult and you do give advices, and then you have another hat on. Then you have more of a teaching role, and you make that explicit. You make explicit when you are coaching and when you are teaching.
I think that's the number one thing. I think ultimately ensuring that the role or the stance, we would call it in sort of Scrum parlance, or it's become Scrum parlance, even though it's not in the Scrum guide. The stance that you're in, the role that you're in, the responsibilities and the accountabilities that you're presenting to the team, and in this case to the client, the individual, need to be very explicit. If you don't, you end up in this sort of mess, if what am I doing here, who am I, what am I, and then you get confusion, and then that leads to lack of trust, etc.
Yeah.
And which brings us very nicely to the coaching and self-organization. Self-organization is one of the sort of three pillars of Scrum, right? Those empiricism, self-organization, and this desire for perfection or continuous improvement. These things support of delivering valuable products and creating good environments for the teams to work, right? Now, to do this effectively requires somebody to effectively help facilitate it. Self-organization doesn't just happen, or maybe it does sometimes, but it's not likely to happen. So having that sort of environment and having somebody that's ultimately helping about that facilitates that. And I think that's the crucial sort of thing that that I think that I've learned over the last 6-9 months as we've been talking.
Yeah, yes. So that's also one thing the ICF and Scrum.org have in common in how they envision on how to work with people. Is the self-organization, is also the belief that that's the most sustainable way for people to perform. So yeah, there's overlap. Yeah.
And I think that is super important, because ICF has that part of, you believe that people are ultimately responsible for their own outcomes, and they're responsible for delivering, becoming better and solving their own problems. You create an environment around that to make it successful. We believe that the same thing with respect to we're more explicit on the outcomes that we seek, obviously, because Scrum's a framework for delivering value for complex problems. And then, so surrounding that by an environment for success. So I think there's a lot of synergy there.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, is it's also it's the changing world that you're talking about, and the complexity of the world, and coaching can really help in also taking a step back and reflecting on what's actually happening, and making like conscious decisions on where to go to. And for example, in product backlog management, that can be great. In refinement, also to really reflect on, okay, why are we doing what we're doing, and how are we going to do that? What are we going to make? And yeah, coaching is it really helps there. It's a good tool to do that.
And what's interesting, though, you talked about today, the first part of this presentation, which hopefully we'll get to the second and third, but is that you talked about the relationship. It's a one-to-one relationship. What I think you highlighted is the fact that that has implications on a one-to-many and to the organization as well. You talked about retrospective, for instance, which is a team activity. It's an event that happens at the team after the sprint review, where you review and you retrospect on how you can maybe work better. And what you described was ultimately how the team's working together, the dynamics between that give an opportunity to do some team level type coaching, which is quite different from an individual coaching, right?
I see a lot of parallels as well. It's both goal oriented, and the client in this case is the team. So in team coaching, the client is the team. So you're working more from a system perspective. So how do the dynamics look like in a team? How do we get the best out of each other? What are our common goals? So what was our sprint goal, for example, and how did we work towards that as a team, as a unit? And that retrospective, yes, it's a team coaching opportunity, existing out of different individuals. So when you are sprinting, in that time you can have one-on-ones to coach the individual goals and the individual purpose in the context of the team, of the organization. And the retrospective is a great event to have team coaching in. Some teams also ask for more team coaching, and they actually plan team coaching more within their sprints, and they look. Then product owners can even add that to their backlogs. That is part of delivering a valuable product.
Interesting. It's just interesting how the client becomes a team. That's something I hadn't really thought about until we talked about it.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about agile coach versus professional coach. And obviously, yes, we are a little bit biased here at Scrum.org. We think Scrum Master and agile coach they're very, very similar. And let's not worry about, it's the outcomes that's important, not the name on the t-shirt, right? So
Yeah.
you highlight here a few things. Do you want to sort of highlight anything that's super, super important for our audience?
Yeah, well, firstly, the question was what are the differences, but it's also important to see what are the similarities. And the similarity of both roles is that both roles aim for growing people and to develop people, and it's all from the same intention, to help someone grow. Though the tactics are a little bit different. So the agile coach uses coaching techniques, but teaches and gives advice on how to use agile frameworks and practices. And with that, the aim is to improve the agility of the organization. And the professional coach is only partnering. So he's only partnering with the client in that horizontal relationship, goal-focused process, but there's no teaching or mentoring involved. So it's clean coaching, if I may call it like that. And then, I would just emphasize that a good agile coach situationally use those professional coaching skills and also really understands when to do it and not to do it, and makes it explicit.
And I think that's super interesting as well, that ICF explicitly say your job is not to teach, advise, or consult. And the reason why, even though you may have skills that are very applicable to solving and helping the client solve those particular problems, that doesn't mean you can't use those skills, but that's definitely not in your coaching stance, as it were. And the reason why you do that, and we were talking about this earlier, is around the trust and the transparency and the helping people develop. You teaching them to fish, not giving them fish, kind of thing. Is that right? Did I get that right? I'm not sure I totally got that right. Did I get that right?
Get it right, as in like empowering people.
Yeah, it's about empowering people, and it's not like somebody telling you what to do, as it were.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so as a professional coach, ICF professional coach, you're not giving advice, you're not teaching, you're not telling what to do. You guide the client towards their own answers. Yeah.
Well, as a Scrum Master, sometimes you have to tell them what to do. This is how a sprint review goes. Now, this is Lyssa's work, and obviously Lyssa Adkins has become a little bit of the poster child of agile coaching. And when she means agile coaching, obviously she has her own competencies and her own framework. This is a diagram from that framework. Obviously, if you're interested in this, the link's down there. You'll notice that she also puts teaching and mentoring, technical mastery, business mastery, and transformation mastery alongside professional coaching. She also calls out facilitation, and obviously the agile stuff, which obviously you sort of need. But is this interesting? I mean, also her work comes from ICF as well. Her pragmatic, is it called pragmatic? Yeah, is from ICF, right?
Well, she points out that it is important as an agile coach to master professional coaching skills from the ICF. So that's what she has included in the model, which is super interesting. And I think it's very valuable also for Scrum teams, for any agile team to have that awareness in their team that there's actually professional coaching, and you can do that in that way. What I think what I just already mentioned is that within the frame, it also mentions teaching and mentoring, for example. And within the ICF definition of coaching, those are really different roles. So it's almost like a lot of managers nowadays, a lot of leaders, they want to develop their coaching skills. And you can be a leader and sometimes teaching and just explaining things and give advice and still use coaching skills next to it. You don't have to claim that you are a professional ICF coach to use the skills to guide people further. So yeah, it's a fine line, but I hope I explain it well like this.
And ultimately, as long as you're explicit, it's all good. And I love this.
Yeah.
What did Ken and Jeff mean for the Scrum Master role? And you asked me this, and I was like, as you know,
Yeah.
Scrum evolved over 20, 25 years. Ultimately, I'm not sure they had a clear intent in mind when they created the Scrum Master role. The result, though, of having that Scrum Master role, I think, is really illustrative of this, this movement. You mentioned that leaders are all very interested in building coaching skills. As we transition from an industrial paradigm where most of the work is complicated, simple, the innovation happens in a small office and there's 20 people that do it, or maybe even 200, or in the case of a car, 10,000, but it's relatively small compared to the production line. That now we've gone from this industrial model to this digital, this something else, the next generation of the industrial revolution. And ultimately, what I think the Scrum Master role has become is really as a change agent to facilitate this transition. And they do it through the stances, that we've talked about a lot. And coaching is a fundamental part of it. It is interesting because neither Jeff or Ken, I know them, obviously pretty well. They're awesome, sort of my heroes, as it were. They're the least coachy kind of people that you'll ever meet, ever,
Ah, okay.
which is
Interesting.
interesting. But I
Yeah.
think that's the reason why they made it the role. They're like, I'm not sure I'd be very good at this, but this is important. We need to
Yeah.
make this happen, which is
Yeah. Yeah.
super interesting.
Yeah. No, that's very
Which
interesting. Yeah.
leads us next, and I know and I want to at least get through this question to this,
Yeah.
which is who within a Scrum team does coaching? You pulled this. It was funny. This is from one of our professional Scrum trainers, Ron, based in the Netherlands. The sort of evolution, and you'll see that coach. You called out, which I didn't even notice, that coach is a sport coach. Obviously, you're very familiar with that, with your husband, etc. Is a professional sports coach. What's interesting is that I didn't even notice that, and you sort of highlighted the fact this might be problematic. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, Maaike?
Well, look, first of all, this is 4 years ago, and over the past 4 years, we've just seen that this topic has come to the table. So the evolution of the Scrum Master, the role of the Scrum Master. So it's really a moving topic, and this is, I think, where it started. So it's awesome that this publication was there, because it just shows that there is a growing path for Scrum Masters, and from a clerk to an expert, and the coach was put in the middle as more of a sports coach. And it's interesting that so what I've noticed also in practice is that when we hear the word coach, we associate it with many different roles and stances. For example, the sports coach, and it's just different from how the ICF describes the coach. So it's different from the ICF definition.
Yeah,
But
which
yeah,
also then brings us, I think, to this
yeah,
8 stances. This is obviously towards the end of 2016, so June to September. In 3 months, I know Barry and Ron, I think, were working together at that point as well, which is kind of ironic. And Barry comes
yeah,
out and says, well, hang on a minute, instead of thinking about this gradual progress, these are all the skills that you need, and it's more like a cycle. you know. It's more like a cycle. It's good to see the Netherlands is very energy conscious. You weren't moving enough,
Yeah.
obviously. But there's this cycle
Somehow
of all
comes
the
from this angle, yeah, this
yeah,
corner of the world, yeah.
I know. And they so they did. So Barry talks about these 8 stances of which
Yeah,
coach, and I think Barry, even though they've still got the sports diagram because it's so hard to have an abstract picture, I think
yeah,
in his paper, at very least, he starts talking more like ICF type coach because he's pulled out the sort of like the teacher, this manager, the facilitator, and even the
yeah,
mentor, you know,
yeah.
out separately, and really highlighted it as a separate stance.
Yeah, and he also emphasizes that the role of the Scrum Master is to coach the individual, the team, and the organization. So he says that coaching the individual is with a focus on mindset and behavior, and the team in continuous improvement, and the organization in truly collaborating with the Scrum team. So he also defines some coaching goals there or something like that. So yeah, it's a next step for me in the yeah, for me it is maturing the model, the Scrum model by itself. So what we're now going through. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's super super interesting. I never really looked at the dates. You highlighted it, that we're seeing this sort of evolution, and it's funny that you say, you know, it's all about goals. Ultimately, you know, that what he does in the paper is he highlights those key goals, and interestingly, those goals are actually written in the Scrum Guide, which is crazy that, you know, this
Yeah.
little 16-page, 17-page document actually has those goals. And
Yes.
the nice
Yeah.
thing about ICF is you can take those goals, you can translate it into, so it gets you started. I mean, you may not end there, but it's a great primer, right, um,
Yeah.
for that process.
Yeah. Yeah. It is.
And
Yeah.
then 2019 comes along, and Joshua Patogi, another Scrum trainer, he's like, "Wow, let's look at ICF and the Scrum Master and make it a master of coaching." And
Definitely. Yeah.
not only
Yeah.
is this a crazy picture, which he loves to create crazy pictures, but it sort of highlights some important stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. I really love how he takes it to the next level. Yeah. He says the Scrum Master is the master of coaching, and yeah, so the response can also be, so an ICF masterful coach supports actually the coachee to be the master of their own life. So the word master becomes a bit like goes many directions, but look, he yeah, it's really worth reading his blog because it's the way he refers how to the Scrum Guide, and how the Scrum Guide implicitly and explicitly mentions coaching, and how he sees the ICF competence model and the ethical code as a very valuable asset for the Scrum Master. And in one of his vlogs, actually, he really shows us also how to do that. So when he gets asked for advice and for consultation, he's actually saying, you know what about me helping you finding your own answers? And it's such a simple sentence to throw back, and it will probably shake the other person up a bit, like, okay, so and now what? So I was asking you for advice, but now you want to help me find my own answers. But he also gives us very very clear tools on how to do that as Scrum Master. So it's,
I
yeah,
mean,
very
yeah, that's
inspirational.
great.
Yeah.
I mean, the Socratic method, which ultimately is what he's talking about, right? It is very annoying. When there's a couple of trainers that I work with frequently, and they never ever give you a good answer. They always just ask it from you. And yes, ultimately it's better learning and blah blah blah. But sometimes I
Yeah.
want an answer. The thing that Joshua
Yeah.
does in his blog or vlog or whatever you call it, video blog, is he
Yeah.
basically positions, okay, yeah, that's great, but this is how you do it. Here's some practical ways for making it work. I love this diagram. I think it's really, you know, particularly around keeping it true, you know, like, hey, holding them accountable. You've got to be self-aware. You've got to be authentic. You got to be unbiased. Now, you know, approachable. No personal agenda is super valuable. And I
Mhm.
challenge. That's another reason why I can't be ever a great coach, because I don't go into any situation without an agenda, I feel. By the way, that's not a bad thing. I'm just saying, because I want to get to an outcome, not because I've got some Machiavellian reason to sort of change where we're going. But you know,
Yeah.
I'm always
Yeah.
about outcomes. I've always got
Yeah.
this agenda in mind, you know, which I
Yeah.
think is really
Yeah.
makes it hard,
Oh,
right?
you're pointing out a great thing. Yes, it's a quite an interpersonal skill to not have a to put your own agenda aside. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
not sure I'm very good at that. So yeah, so I
Yeah.
recommend that. The other thing that I liked was this diagram that you created, which I think really
Yeah.
ties this together. And maybe this will be one of the last slides that we show, because I think it's really interesting. Do you want to walk us through this?
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. So yeah. So I feel like really a mature Scrum Master understands the value of one-on-one coaching. So it starts with the individual with a purpose. Every individual has a purpose and a goal, and yeah, you could say that translates into a personal development plan, but that's just a name for it. But so as a Scrum Master, you can yeah achieve a lot with the one-on-one coaching. Although achieving a lot is it's more on the client side, it's not the Scrum Master's result. Then there's the team. In Scrum, you can translate that to a product backlog and a sprint backlog. So there are all kind of hypotheses and goals going around there. Product backlog maybe more hypotheses, and the sprint backlog really concrete goals. And also there is a purpose and there is a goal. And and then there you move more to the team coaching. Um, then there is the organization, and yeah, look in what I've seen around at the organization I worked with, we call that the scaled portfolio, for example, and which is like the backlog, the bigger backlog or the bigger context of the backlog of a team. And there's also a purpose and a goal, and there you can use some transformation coaching. So you use different type of coaching, but it's all coaching to align these things with each other as well.
I think there's a couple of interesting points this highlighted. The arrows go in one direction, which doesn't mean that it's not a cyclical process, because of course it is. But I think it highlights the fact that to be an effective coach, you have to start with the people that make up the teams, the Scrum teams, which I thought was really interesting. I also, you know, thought that it actually ends up with artifacts and things. Obviously, as a Scrum guy, I really love transparency, and I think that you know, so a coach tried to persuade me to start keeping a personal journal, which is a very key artifact around personal development, and I think it's invaluable. And I'm trying to do it. I'm not doing a very good job, and I need somebody to hold me more accountable for that. But those physical artifacts make things transparent, right? Which then leads us nicely into the sort of purpose and goal, that kind of thing,
Yeah,
which then drives the team, which then drives the
yeah,
organization.
you can say, you can put it like that, I guess. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
which is super interesting. Now, I know we're coming up. We've only got about 6 minutes left, so I want to make sure that we do have. There's a couple of questions that have come in that I do want us to. So, and I think this and these this slide in particular, I think sort of highlights. I think these two slides sort of highlight the essence of what we've been talking about. I know we still have 3 more questions to ask, and there's lots of things we can do. But I just want to bring up a question that Pratiti Galop, I can't say your name, I'm sorry, but somebody and a few people have said this, is the balancing the role of a coach with the sort of agile managing and all this kind of how do you balance your coaching stance with the other stances that you have to have? Because imagine there's a team of 7 people, you do one-on-ones once a week, that's a day. You obviously need time to prepare, or maybe it's only 30 minutes, so maybe it's only half a day, but suddenly then you're going to help your product owner, How do you
Yeah.
balance the time?
How do you balance the time? Wow. Well,
Well,
I
how do you
never really
balance the
think of
role?
time actually,
Where
but
do you where do you spend where do you spend your time? Where would you spend your time more? What's the most important? And I know context is everything, but what do you
yeah.
think, from personal experience?
Yeah, it's for me. It's really what the people in the team asks you. So, if I have if I see, for example, that a team is in need to understand how to slice their backlog items or how to get get their stories more concrete. Yeah, look, a lot of teams work with user stories. It's not per se a Scrum element, but let's say user stories. Then I rather choose to offer training. So rather, provide a training, get the team together. Let's just train ourselves on how to slice user stories. You can even get real user stories and do it on the job. So there, I wouldn't really use coaching. Um, but when it comes to, for example, team dynamics or personal goals, how do I um, reach my personal goals during a sprint when we have to work on our sprint backlog, and how do I still get satisfied with my own expectations on myself? Yeah, that are coaching questions. So it's really about the question that comes to you and understand what's the need.
Mm.
And
So you're saying that there isn't, you should spend 20% of your time doing
no,
coaching, 40%, 20% of your time doing, you say that
no,
it will vary every sprint. Do you make that sort
it
of
varies a
transparent?
lot, and it also varies in your personal style. So yes, like um, one Scrum Master likes to um, uh, take more facilitation or teaching as a stance, and the other Scrum Master will take the coaching stance. Or so yeah, it's also style.
You see, I mean, I agree it's the style thing. And one thing though, I do think that there needs to be some level of balance. I actually do
Yeah,
believe, and I'm no expert at this, from what I've observed from seeing lots and lots of teams, you tend to get very different. Whatever people are more comfortable with tends to be the stance that they spend most of their time. Our professional Scrum trainers, for instance, tend to be good at mentoring and teaching and increasingly facilitation using liberating structures, because that's part of some of our classes now. They don't necessarily spend their time coach, and you see a very different style of delivery. And I think that we're missing something. And so I think we need to sort of balance all of these stances, and you almost need a transparent, sort of self-coach. Who coaches the coach, for instance? Do you?
yeah, oh, definitely. Yeah, that's super nice question. Well, I think masters amongst each other can also coach each other, for example. But one thing that also came to my mind is that it also depends on the maturity of the team, actually.
Mm,
So the questions that come, so um, I think when a team comes together at the start, like when you just put a team, like the team comes together for the first time, there's still a lot of questions and open insecurity. So you would like to create a safe space by answering questions and more teach and consult. And but of course, always with the servant leadership in mind, like always with that partnering that coaching has, always that partnering part.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I know we're coming up to our time, and I don't want to overstay our welcome. We've only just
Yeah, we have one more
basically
minute.
jumped on the surface. We've really just tapped the surface of this conversation. For instance, we
Definitely,
didn't
yeah.
get to talk about the coaching agreement, which I think could be a really valuable artifact that Scrum Masters start using with their team members. We did, however, introduce a lot of these ideas. So I'd like to thank you, Maaike, for today's taking the time, working with your community to sort of start thinking about these things.
Yeah.
We have a number of questions. So one thing, hopefully you'll be willing to carry on working with Scrum.org on these interesting questions, because I think we as an industry, as we navigate this different kind of leadership management, need to really learn about this stuff. And as your lights go off in support.
Yeah, it's like they timing it. Yes. Yeah. No, thank you, Dave. Thank you very much. It was really, it has been a great journey so far, and I would just love to have the dialogue up and running and just explore this more and more. And yeah, it's really great. It's a great journey.
It is, and it's just the start of a journey. So thank you, ladies and
Definitely.
gentlemen, for attending today's webinar. Obviously, you'll be sent a recording, and if you've got any further questions, feel free to reach out to myself or Maaike, which you saw some of that information at the start of this webinar. And hopefully there'll be a series of these around this topic as we explore some of these topics further. I know the Netherlands, which is the most Scrum-friendly country in the world, definitely has a very active chapter and an active set of organizations around this. So watch out for more material. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your patience. And I hope to see you in another webinar in the future. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.